I'm Dan Sheehy. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all virtually. And this is basically a basement. But over the last 37 years, it's been turned into a number of things, mainly a rehearsal room and a library and an office space. So sort of the first thing that people ask about, just to do that, are the Grammys here, which these are producer Grammys that I've had the privilege of working with great musicians. So the best thing you can do as a producer is start with really good musicians. So two of these are for Mariachi Los Camperos. One is they're both the same category, but this is for Amor, Dolor y Lagrimas, Musica Ranchera. That was one album by Los Camperos. Next to this is a East LA rock group, Quetzal is the name of it. They do kind of son jarocho inflected rock music. Best Latin rock, urban, or alternative album. Then here we have the Ayer Para Siempre. This was Naticano's last album with Folkways, and that received, Naticano was the founder, director of Mariachi Los Camperos. And here is a group that I'm really fond of. It's those Tex Maniacs from San Antonio, Texas. And you can see on the wall over there the album cover for Borders y Bailes, which is the Tex Maniacs album. And actually the album right below here, this is from Puerto Rico, Musica Ranchera, got 2 Grammy nominations, 1 Grammy nomination, 1 Latin Grammy nomination. They didn't win the Grammy, but you know, if you're one of the top 5 out of everybody who did something in your field, that's not bad. And this is the album cover, large version of Quetzal Flores and his wife Marta Gonzalez. Over time have been the key figures of that group based in East Los Angeles. And you know, starts off, they play jarana, jarocha, and are part of the jaranero movement, which is a big thing in both Mexico and the United States and in parts of Europe. And this is the Amor, Dolor y Lagrimas album by Naticano and Los Camperos that won a Grammy. And so Laura, my better half here, for years taught young people Mexican folk dance. And this mirror here was installed for the dance group, for the young people to be able to kind of see themselves and that sort of thing.
Beautiful dress.
Dance floor, and this is a new dress that she got. So I was co-editor of the South America, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean volume, 11-page volume of the Garland Encyclopedia World Music. And so we had something like 40 authors. Anyway, so now I'm trying to downsize. It's not easy because I have a relationship with all these books here. But I'm working on it little by little. And this over time has been the sort of the home base for Mariachi Los Amigos. And I have some of a little history of my own mariachi life here. Up top you see Mariachi Uclatlan when it was a student group with a certain young fellow named Jim Fogelquist, who was a student at UCLA then, standing right next to our teacher, Jesus Sanchez from Zacualco de Torres in Jalisco. And some of our people that, Victor Romero, longtime friends, Jose Perez, and there's Bob Dixon, who was a social worker and just loved playing mariachi music. And then Steve Rizza, on the far Polish-American guy, violinist, who he went into IT. So he started he doing, I think it was the software and apps or something like that. Also, here's another photo of Mariachi Uclatlan with Mark Fogelquist up top, Gus Ramos, yours truly on the right, Capiro de Jalisco número uno, and then Joel Quibby, who went on to be an orchestra director in Chico, California, Jim Fogelquist right in the middle, Victor Romero, and El Kid, Jose Ramos, right. And another photo from that era. We're talking 1968 to probably 72, something like that.
I think these are probably in the early 70s.
Yeah, okay. And then I went off to Veracruz. I got a Fulbright and worked with these guys and a lot of other people. I played 6 days a week, right, in Boca del Rio, donde desemboca el Río Jamapa con el Golfo. And then moved back here to Washington, and we started Mariachi Los Amigos in 1978. There we had Bonnie Bright in the middle. She was from California. And Richie Medrano, who was with the group for a while, and he wasn't with the group. Now he's back. He played today. Mario Castro, the bass player today. Luis Gonzalez from Mexico City. Byron Perez from Guatemala. Terry Liu, Chinese-American friend, and then me up there. And because we're in Washington, we have lots of interesting clients, such as Ted Kennedy.
Okay, fine. Hurry up, the band's starting. Bye.
Every year we played at his birthday party in his home. That was a lot of fun. He was a really nice man. And at our break, he would leave all of his guests and he would go to the room where they had us rest, and he'd just sit down and talk to us like we were adults. So, talking about political things, talking about farm workers' rights and things like that. In Los Angeles, before I did all that, I played jarocho music with my now late compadre Lalo Lingron, and then Jose Fajera, Cuban-American, who moved back here, but then he died, unfortunately, of AIDS. And then back here, Luis Gonzalez from Mexico City, and I started a Duo Los Amigos, everything with Los Amigos. So it was Duo Los Amigos, Trio Los Amigos, Mariachi Los Amigos. And we'd end up playing in restaurants. This one performance, we walked in the restaurant. It was a Talabardero, I think it was, near the White House, Spanish restaurant. And out comes Placido Domingo and saying, muchachos, bienvenidos, muchachos. And it turned out it was his wife's birthday party. So I was really excited until I realized that I was going to have to sing in front of Placido Domingo.
Termine mi canción, tú sabes que yo cumplo un juramento. Acuérdate que siempre te adoré, no dejes que me pierda mi pobreza, que todo lo que tuve se me fue. Si tú también te vas, me lleva la tristeza. No dejes que me muera por tu amor, si tienes corazón, enséñalo y regresa. Everybody, canta, canta, canta. Que tu dicha estándar y hasta Dios te adora. Canta, canta, canta. Una blanca mientras mi alma llora.
So recently, Barack Obama sent a nice. That's when I got that. I got this National Heritage Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts down here. That's the national. It's kind of embarrassing for me because I ran that program and I started the program in 1999, and I came out with this rhetoric to describe the Bess Lomax Hawes Award. She was my boss and mentor for a long time, so I had to create some rhetoric around this award. So I said it was the highest award in the folk and traditional arts that the federal government of the United States offers. And that is still circulating out there 25 years later. So every time I hear that, I kind of get a little embarrassed. You know, the fact that I got the award that I created, you know, it's really nice, but I get a little bit, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it. And this is when I think I retired the first time. Yeah, this is when I retired the first time. A friend of mine worked in the White House, and that's how those things happen a lot of times, they engineer. And up here, here's another photo of Jim Folkways' brother Mark, Victor Romero, Jose Ramos, yours truly, Joe Quibi, and Capito. And likewise here in front of the San Gabriel Mission in the east of Los Angeles, and out there. And
Jesus Sanchez was our
and Jesus Sanchez was our teacher.
teacher
Yeah, our mentor. Yeah.
Where? At
at
UCLA.
UCLA.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that it just warms my heart the most of these things. This is just out of the blue in the mail. I got a card from Linda Ronstadt. It was one of these least expensive cards you could possibly imagine, you know, bought at a drugstore or something like that. And she just wrote a nice little personal note just out of the blue. Just and it showed up, you know, in the mail one day. So we've sort of aligned ourselves with similar causes over the years, and we know of each other. You know, we've gotten together and talked and stuff like that. And then this is, I've just always loved music instruments. I got my bachelor's degree in music education, and the best thing about it for me was they would teach us to play each instrument in the band and orchestra just a little bit. And I just loved musical instruments.
So what are the instruments that you have here?
Good question. So these are arranged by Mexican regional style, right? So the Huasteca is back here in the East. When I'm talking about, you know, talking to the public about things this, I say the Huasteca is the Maryland, D.C., Virginia part of Mexico. In other words, it's in the sort of northwest, but not all the way up to the top. And so these are the two basic guitar instruments for the Conjunto Huasteco. The Huasteca is a region in Mexico, basically, that overlaps 5 states. And so this is the huapanguera. It has a particular sound. This is the jarana Huasteca. That has this, I don't know if this is tuned up. Let's see if it is. More or less, a little bit. So it has its own tuning, own fingerings, and all that. This is another jarana Huasteca that I bought more recently. It has a preamp, so you can plug it in directly to the sound system. And then from here on, well, in the middle part, this is son jarocho music from Veracruz, from Sotavento, which is the southern coastal point of Veracruz, from more or less the port of Veracruz south to slightly into Tabasco and slightly into Oaxaca. And this was made by, these days, is one of the most consequential musicians in the history of the son jarocho. Gilberto Gutierrez, in 1977, he got this epiphany. He was from Veracruz, but he lived in Mexico City. He was working in a warehouse. And he saw all this music from Venezuela, from Colombia, from the Los Andes, you know, Altiplano and all that, Violeta Parra, all this Latin American music where people were refugees, violence, you know, basically. And he was inspired by that. But he looked around, he said, so where's Mexican folk music in all this? And so he got together with a North American Mexican. The Juan Pasco was the son of an American diplomat married to a Mexican woman, and he was in Chicago. But he moved back to Mexico. He eventually followed his main love, which was art press. He does these beautiful art books, you know, with old style presses that create beautiful things. And they started Mono Blanco. Mono Blanco is there's a legend around Catemaco, particularly, but in Veracruz, about the white monkey and all the magical things that it does. So Mono Blanco became the turning point in the history of the son jarocho in Mexico. From that point on, they were kind of a back to the roots sort of thing, and they eschewed the mariachi music. They eschewed the son jarocho, you know, that was professionalized. And so they wanted to get away from the professionalized, what they thought was stereotyped versions of Mexican folk music. And so they got together with this guy, an older man, Alcalde Hidalgo. They honored elders, they sought them out. They started the lifeblood, traditionally, old time, of the Son Jarocho was the fandango, which is a rural dance and music celebration. And so they created a whole movement, which starting these days, for the last, since about, let's say, early 80s, was called the Jaranero movement, el Movimiento Jaranero. And 78 and 79, there was an encuentro in Tlacotalpan on the Papaloapan River. And then it spread. And so in the United States, it went to the United States, it went to South America, went to Europe. So there's all these jaraneros, including here in Washington, D.C.
And in North Carolina.
In North Carolina.
With Sofia Henrique
playing.
does a lot with the fandango.
Well, there you go. The man who made this guitar was the key individual in the key group that sparked the Movimiento Jaranero.
Did it impact the fabrication of instruments?
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
So did they return to sort of an older design, or?
Well, I'll give you the broad overview, just sort of with the punchline in it, is that they went back to roots, to the basics, which included things like the beliefs in harvesting the wood when the moon was in a certain phase, and you let it sit for a certain time. So there's all the process behind the building of the instrument, and then this shape, see this narrow shape with a waist right here. The Spanish Baroque guitar, other Baroque guitars, but in Spain particularly, this is the typical shape of the Spanish Baroque guitar from those years, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s kind of thing. And it's also thin. It's thinner than a lot of guitars. And it's also this made of one piece except for the top. So, it's escarbado, and then you put the top on. But the other aspect of this that was part of the impact of the Jaranero movement is the tunings. In the late 30s and 1940s, the professional musicians, because they played with guitarists, and also because guitarists would play the jarocho instruments, they changed the tuning so it would be similar to a guitar fingering, and it's really similar to a Mariachi Vihuela. I don't know if this is tuned. Yeah. So this is tuned like a guitar with only 5 strings. The bass string, the bottom string is not there. So you figure So this was made by a man I just adored. He was one of the people I played music with 6 days a week in Boca del Rio, and I knew his son from Los Angeles. His name was Isidoro Gutierrez, and his son was, they call him Chayote, that's his nickname, Jose Gutierrez. He's my compadre, and we've known each other since about 1973, probably, something like that. And his father made this, and you can look inside.
That's
if
what
you
I
can
was
see
trying.
that with the light, there's a taladro is used to drill out the inside of the the wood.
What kind of wood is that?
This is called cucharo. Cedro rojo is like a tropical cedar. Is the most common. Most of these instruments here will have the traditional instruments will have cedar as their base material. Okay, and then what happened in the Baroque is that you did not have a standard A440. So everybody just kind of tuned to wherever they kind of were. They also had many different tunings, each one requiring a different fingering. And so certain keys would call for, this kind of tuning. The most common one is called por cuatro, or also por mayor. And so, this tuning over time, and this sometimes the Jaranero movement is criticized for this, because part of the idea of the Jaranero movement was to bring all of this diversity in instruments and tunings and repertoire and everything to the forefront. But then over time, let's say 20 years later, people were falling back into standardized, tunings and everything, and also getting away from the fandango as their main driver of the thing, and doing shows and the whole thing. So there's both are happening, and as far as I'm concerned, the universe expands. That's the way it happens, So things go back and forth, but you're constantly having new ideas, new innovations. So instead of playing a C like this, C chord, which would be like for a guitar, it's tuned this way. Just put one finger down. So. This is a harp I got because before I went back to work, we were going to travel a lot, and this harp will fit an overhead in it.
Oh.
It's called a harpsichord. It's a company in Indiana. Has 4 octaves almost. The modern Veracruz harp has 5 octaves, but you don't use that lowest octave unless. Those strings, the way they sound like that, it's a little more appropriate for like Celtic music or different kinds of music, but it's something you can carry with you and practice,
Looks more like a Celtic harp, doesn't it?
Yeah. The Celtic harp has a curved pillar like that, but yeah. This is called a requinto jarocho, and in the jaranero movement plays melody. It's a melody guitar, and in Veracruz there historically are sub-regions. So the harp was most popular in the plains, and there's a major Afro influence in Veracruz, and music and everything really. And I've done a lot of research on this the last 2 years for this book project, and there's some great scholarship out there. I sent a little piece of something to Jim there. The blacks and from Africa and their descendants via the Caribbean, where there was a long period of time where people would circulate in the Caribbean. So we're talking about Venezuela, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Veracruz mainly. So there was a lot of influence. There's a certain kind of music that had guitars and melody guitars, choral guitars, and harps. But then after all the independence movement, starting with Haiti in the early 1800s, all these countries went their own way, and they stopped having this intense contact through commerce, basically, and just movement of population. So there's similarities between Venezuela, Colombia, Puerto Rico, and Veracruz, but there are differences because they've drifted apart over time, becoming their own.
And the variations in the Anglo-speaking Caribbean, like Trinidad and Tobago,
Yeah,
and
there's a parang.
the parang,
Stuff,
that they sing in Spanish, but they don't know what they're singing.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you have the 3 main of the son jarocho, popular in the 1930s with Andres Huesca, Lino Chavez, in the 40s, Los Costeños, up into the 50s and 60s, into the 70s, were the harp, arpa jarocha, the jarana jarocha, and the requinto jarocho. And that was your standard thing. But in the country, and this is what the jaranero movement did, they knew and they sought out all the greater variety of instruments to bring them together. For example, there's this family of jaranas that, they say this is based in Baroque musical tradition, but as a musicologist myself, I can say that a music historian is that families of similar sounding instruments were from the Renaissance. The Renaissance was the time when you would have 8 sizes of bowed lute or something like that to give this blended sound. That was the aesthetic, a blended sound. The Baroque brought a major difference, a differentiated bass, a high melody, and an anonymous middle, a chordal middle, just filling with rhythm and chords, right? And so even though they say Baroque music was the style was very much part of son jarocho, you have this families of instruments that's more of a Baroque aesthetic. So some people would call this a chaquiste, which is the smallest size of jarana. And so you have one a little bigger than this, and then you would have a moving up in size. You would have a jarana segunda like this. I didn't know I was going to be doing this, so I didn't tune these instruments. But you can see this is smaller, and I bought this from a guy named El Godo. I don't even know his real name, but he's in Mexicali. He has a radio show, and he's a jaranero, and he was part of the album with Quetzal Flores, and so we're recording there. And he had this thing. It was some amateur maker or just beginning maker was starting to make something, and he cut it in the wrong spot himself, because El Godo took it and salvaged it and made it sound really good. And he had it right there, and I didn't have a jarana segunda, so I bought it off him right there on the recording session. Anyway, see, it's a higher sound. It is kind of a, if this is a segunda and the other one's a tercera, that's what they call it, jarana tercera, jarana segunda. This would be like a 2.5.
So there is no real standard.
Well, there is and there isn't. Yeah, there's a standard, but people vary. And in Tlacotalpan, on the Tlacotalpan River, there's a sub-style in which they use the pandero. So this is a Veracruz pandero, jingles, and I don't play it very well. And you have to wax it up first. So you make it.
They call it pandero, not pandereta.
Exactly, pandero. Anyway,
Wow.
so it kind of rattles, So I wake up in the morning, I have tea, I meditate, then I go into the audition, I take the violin off the wall, I practice violin for 45 minutes, and then I have breakfast, and then I work on my book, or whatever I have to do, on the computer. And then I do my thing all day, and then I come back about 5 o'clock, and the first thing I do is trumpet, because trumpet is like being an athlete.
You gotta do it.
Mucha fuerza, muchísima fuerza. And if you want to go out and play football, you can't sit around for 3 months and then expect to go out and play football. Plus, you're going to get killed. And so I just make sure I keep my the embouchure up, and I do 30 to 45 minutes every day. I drive people crazy. And then I move from there to the arpa.
Oh.
And this is like learning how to play piano, because you have to use both hands. I also have to warm up because I'm getting old. So I finally worked my way up to, this is my repertoire. So I can keep track of it. And so every day I'm telling you my routine. So I'll go through and I'll do a chunk, then next day another chunk, just to try to get
Every day.
every day, pretty much. I'm not going to do it today. For obvious reasons.
You can't play if you don't play every day.
Yeah,
So
you
what
have
is
to-
the-
you have to practice.
What is the story of this particular instrument? Where did you get this?
This was made by
Mario Rosales en
Rosales.
Veracruz, claro.
Mario Rosales.
Mario
Who,
Rosales.
He doesn't make harps anymore because he had terrible health problems and he's blind, essentially. He was a harpist and some would say the best quality harp maker of Veracruz style harps in Mexico.
So you bought it in Veracruz?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a Fulbright, and so I have a lot of contacts in Veracruz. Basically, lived in Veracruz for 10 months, and then this was made by Mr. Perez Morfin is his last name. He was considered one of the top arpa grande makers This was made for somebody taller. Mr. Morphine is about this tall. So, and I got this because in 2010 we had a Smithsonian Folklife Festival program all on Mexico. And we had a conjunto de Ayer Para Grande from Michoacan coming up. And everybody but Perez Morfin made it through immigration. They stopped him at the border. So we had a group there, but no harpist. And fortunately, a couple of us knew of a young boy, 16 years old, in near Merced, California, in the San Joaquin Valley, Leonel Mendoza, and his whole family, they were just musicians. And he had been learning harp. And so, and you know, they were all from Tepalcatepec, you know, that's right on the river there, the same river basin where all those, you know, Arpaganantes are from. And so he came back and played this harp at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival in 2010, and he was really good. Today, for me, at least in the United States, and maybe in Mexico, and also Alvaro Ochoa, the scholar, you know, of Michoacan and mariachi music, thinks that he's the best. I don't think he'll write that anywhere, but when he got married, when Leonel got married up in California, there were only two people at the wedding event that was in a big park that weren't like his family or whatever. One was Alvaro and one was me. I didn't know Alvaro was going to be there. He didn't know I was going to be there. We just happened to be there. We had a great time.